I was a kid, I loved Greek mythology. I really loved Greek mythology. Still have some of the books I had as a kid. I don't know why I was fascinated by it. I grew up in the Middle East, grew up in Dubai in the 1980s, went to Greece in ninth grade. And I had a teacher who I think probably my teacher, Mr. Middlebrooks, is the one who really made me love Greek mythology. I mean, all the different stories. Apollo and Artemis. My favorite is Athena. In fact, I bought in Greece at the base of the Acropolis, no less, a statue of Athena. I keep in my office. The goddess of wisdom sprang from Zeus's head. And we went to Sparta. We went to Mycenae. We saw the death mask of Agamemnon. Greece is a beautiful country of wonderful people. I love Greece. Several friends of mine have gone there on holiday. They've got married or they've honeymooned there recently. It's a wonderful place. If you ever get the chance to go to Greece, go. I will say this: if you go, stay in Athens and travel south. Now, northern Greece, and you want to go to Mount Olympus. Surely you want to go see Mount Olympus. That area is beautiful, but from Marathon south down to Sparta, it's where a lot of the history is. And it's a wonderful place. We stayed one night or one day we took a trip down to southern Greece. We stayed in a little town, Nafplion, on the coast. Had a fortress. It took, 2,000 or 3,000 steps up the side. You could walk up to get up there. Had a nice little ice cream shop. It was the one place all the American kids were allowed to roam around at night by ourselves. A little town. It was very quaint. I would love to go back to that place. But I digress. I love Greek mythology. One of the things about Greek mythology is how the mythology changed over time. So the stories evolved over time of who did what, who had what, who was sleeping with whom, who was a product of Zeus and a mistress and who wasn't. All of these stories over time, they kind of changed. But all of the stories had a similar thinking. They were to explain the way the world worked. So, for example, the narcissus flower that grows along riverbanks in Greece. Well, there was a guy named Narcissus. He was a narcissist. It's where we get the word from. And he loved to look at himself, and he stared in the river so long that the river gods turned him into the Narcissus so he could stay by the riverbank and look at himself all the time. Why does the sun move across the sky? It is Apollo, Helios, driving his chariot across the sky. And of course, as the Romans took over, the mythology changed to a degree. Different stories came about. But there was always it was always to explain in some way the world worked. The seasons changed because Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, the sister of Zeus and Hades, had a daughter, Persephone. And she was married off to Hades against her mother's will by Zeus, giving Hades Persephone. And so the seasons were when the spring came, Persephone was allowed to go back to stay with her mother, and her mother would allow the plants to bloom. And then in the fall, Persephone had to go back to Hades, and in despair again, her mother would cause all the vegetation to die off in her despair, while her daughter descended to hell. That's how the seasons came about. A lot of you will say, well, isn't this just what religion is? And they didn't. No, well, there are kernels of truth of real religion that weave through some of the mythologies. What I find interesting about the Judeo-Christian record is that Moses, writing Genesis 1 in his creation account, it is very countercultural. His view of the way the universe was created, his cosmogony, differs from every organized religion on planet Earth, and in fact disagreed with every organized religion on planet Earth until Christianity became mainstream in the 300s AD with the Roman Empire and Constantine. Because every single other religion out there was polytheistic. There were a handful of monotheistic religions that never really took off, but here comes the Judeo-Christian religion, and not only does it say there is one God, but that these things in the sky, these stars and the moon and the sun, they're just objects. I mean, that was count. I mean, you do whether you believe or not, you got to understand that this is something that deviated from everything that existed on the planet. And now we know archaeologically, even with the civilizations that were setting up in the Western hemisphere, it was completely unique. It's completely unique for Moses in Genesis 1 to say the sun and the moon are just objects in the sky, and the stars, they're just these things God put there. They're not divine. It was whether you believe it was divinely inspired or not, it was a unique insight that came about thousands of years ago, more than 2,000 years ago, at a time where literally every civilization on the planet treated those objects in the sky as if they were divine themselves. That is a profound insight I don't think people in our day and age appreciate, of the uniqueness of that insight in Genesis 1 that carried over to Christianity, that then rapidly caused the old gods to fall away. Now, this is not about believe it or not, this is not a topic of religion here. I bring all of this up because human beings to this day, thousands of years after Zeus and Apollo and Hades and Poseidon and Athena and Hera and Demeter have all faded away, humans to this day believe mythologies. Mythologies, sometimes we call them conspiracy theories, but mythologies help us explain the world around us. And as people dive into cults of personality, those mythologies sometimes are what then elevate and build and amplify the cults of personality. I got to go there, but just bear with me here. Give me 1 minute to make my case. Stolen election. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. See, this is why I say give me a minute. I'm not talking about that one. I am not talking about 2020 and the stolen election. Here's Stacey Abrams from just the other day.
I come from a state where I was not entitled to become the governor. But as an American citizen and a citizen of Georgia, I'm going to fight for every person who has the right to vote to be able to cast that vote.
Stacey Abrams says she was not entitled to become the governor of Georgia. Stacey Abrams has, long before Donald Trump, Stacey Abrams peddled, if the media wants to call it the big lie, Stacey Abrams peddled the lie, that the 2018 election was stolen from her. She was not entitled to become, you know what? I wasn't entitled to become governor either. I'm sorry. Apparently way more common. The Democrats and the media have allowed Stacey Abrams to peddle a mythology to explain to them the way the world works, that Republicans stole the election. She said that, ironically, campaigning for Terry McAuliffe in Virginia. Terry McAuliffe himself still to this day claims that the 2000 and 2004 elections were stolen. In fact, when confronted, Terry McAuliffe in the last few weeks has continued to deny that they were legitimate elections. Just that we have to move on from those elections. But he doesn't believe they were legitimate elections. He still believes that these elections were stolen from the Democrats. It is a Democrat mythology that is pervasive. When the Democrats lose, it is because Republicans stole the election. What is so ironic about this is here comes Donald Trump in 2020, and he doubles down on these were stolen elections. My election was stolen from me. And the Democrats and social media and major companies are like, you can't say that. That's the big lie, equating it to Nazism and Hitler. When the Democrats themselves constantly deny that elections are fair unless they win. Democrats themselves have built a mythology, and here's the thing. It's that the Democrats don't like the Republicans taking their mythology and co-opting it. That's the problem here. It's like a non-Christian taking Christianity and co-opting it for themselves. And it really makes the Christians mad. It's the Democrats, or the Republicans have taken the Democrats' mythology from them and co-opted it for themselves, and the Democrats are livid about it. And they're trying to grab hold of it. Jason Johnson is a Democrat political commentator. He was on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace yesterday. Listen to this.
What do you think happens, Jason? You think they take the wrong lessons from the possibility that they have some success? They seem to be good at that as well.
Well, Nicole, I think they've taken the right lessons, and the right lessons are you can rally people around a lie based on white supremacy and sexism and nationalism and homophobia and everything else like that. And a key thing to understand why Republicans are optimistic next year, even if they're sort of waving themselves and wrapping themselves in a Trump burrito, is they're going to cheat. I mean, they're just going to make voting laws throughout the country that guarantee that they're going to win. There are very few states right now, Nicole, where there is a very good, active, organizing Republican Party. The Republican Party in Georgia is in shambles because they haven't had to work in so long. They just figure that they're going to pass legislation and make it harder for Democrats to vote. The Republican Party isn't really ready to run a campaign outside of the Midwest. They just figure if we can pass enough voter suppression, wrap ourselves in Trump, and intimidate the other side, we can win in 2022.
There's your mythology. They're already setting themselves up. They know what's coming next year. By the way, notice how he says in Georgia, the Republican Party has problems in Georgia. The Republican Party in Georgia has a lot of problems, but the Republicans in Georgia are far more organized than people who watch MSNBC would be led to believe. But notice how he said Georgia, and then he said Republicans can't win outside the Midwest. Last I checked, the state that I am currently sitting in is not in the Midwest. I sit in Georgia. I happen to know far more about what's happening in Georgia than Jason Johnson does. But he's pre-gaming the election, seeding the mythology. He wants the mythology. They got to have the mythology because they know what's coming next year because it always comes to the party in the White House. In the first midterm elections in particular, they tend to do poorly. And so they got to build their mythology. Their mythology as well. It's the Republicans. They passed a bunch of icky laws. And those laws are voter suppression. And that's why we're going to lose next year. By the way, as an aside, 427,205 Republicans in Georgia did not vote in the runoff. They voted in the general election in 2020. They didn't go back in the runoff and vote overwhelmingly because they believed it was going to be stolen. So why bother? If the Democrats do the same thing next year, so why bother? They've changed the laws. They're going to steal it. They're going to steal the election. That makes it even the turnout for the Democrats becomes even worse, and the bloodbath is even a bigger blood because it's going to be an electoral bloodbath. Metaphorically speaking, that you used to be able to say this stuff, and then Democrats got hypersensitive to it until James Hodgkinson came along. But totally metaphorical, an electoral bloodbath. They're going to be wiped out at the polls by voters casting votes. And they got to tell you now and sell you on a mythology of why the coming disaster is going to happen. The leaves are falling off the trees because Zeus promised his brother Hades, stay in Hades and I will send you the beautiful Persephone. And their sister Demeter, Persephone was her daughter, she became very sad. And the time is now coming for Persephone to return to hell. And so as Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, sadness grows. The leaves turn red with rage and then brown in despair, and they fall. And then Persephone, in the darkness of winter, is in hell. The world around us is barren and without trees with leaves, because that's how the Greeks explained the seasons. Not much different from the Democrats explaining their coming electoral losses.